Wish I was kidding. Oh, she just blocks you outright. I didn't know she blocks you. Okay. Anyways, this gym is infamous. The Whitney fight is infamous for being one of the most difficult fights in Pokemon in general. Baka Pitbull, mentioned earlier. Oh god, not Whitney. I'm having flashbacks, and that's understandable, honestly. So, the thing with Pokemon games and why they're not usually that difficult is because the difficulty of a Pokemon game really depends on how far into the game you are and what Pokemon are, or what tools in general are available to you for each stage of the game. Oh my god, that crit me. Oh, Zink, I'm glad you're here because I'm about to explain Whitney and why she's actually problematic, like the real reason for it. So, difficulty in Pokemon games really stems upon two things. Number one is obviously the opponents that you're facing, like how good are their Pokemon, their stats, their move pools, all that stuff. Which, especially in early generations, generally is not good. Pokemon in the early generations have terrible movesets when you play against them for the most part. The Pokemon are pretty weak early generations, things along those lines. But the funny thing is that there are some hidden gems, such as Whitney and to a slightly lesser extent Morty. These are both really difficult fights. And the reason for Whitney being so difficult, it depends on who you ask. If you ask a speedrunner, they say that the problem is Clefairy. If you ask any casual player, they will tell you that it's Whitney. And a lot of us 90s kids growing up playing Pokemon when we were just little kids and didn't know strategy and stuff like that, we have to deal with Whitney and her Miltank, and we all have like flashbacks and we all think it's like one of the most difficult fights ever. And to be fair, it kind of is. So it starts with the fact that Whitney, as a normal type trainer, her ace Pokemon is Miltank, which is a Pokemon with no evolutions. So it's already got good stats. I think it has a base defense of, I will actually double check it right now. Props to Cerebi.net for being the most useful website ever. So Miltank has stats of, I think it was 105 defense, 95 HP, 100 speed, 80 attack. Like, these are good stats for this early in the game. At best, you'll have like a mid-stage Pokemon, like your starter will be in its second evolutionary stage, so your stats generally not as high as Miltank's is number one. So your stats compared to your opponents are just lower. Number two, the fact that the Miltank's rollout attack ramping up every turn just makes it really strong, which leads into number three, where people say just use Geodude. Yes, you can cheese the fight by having her use rollout on a Pokemon weak to it and then sending out Geodude, but if your Geodude for whatever reason doesn't deal enough damage, even though it's resisted, rollout when it gets stronger can still end up doing big chunks of damage. So Geodude, probably the actual best way of dealing with the fight, but not always 100% reliable. I have a strategy personally that I think is more reliable. The other issue with Geodude is that Geodude is slow. Miltank is not slow, and Miltank actually knows Stomp, which can flinch you. So it is possible, unlikely, but still possible, for Miltank to keep stomping you over and over, and for you to flinch every time. The next issue is that because of its high HP and defense stats, it's very difficult to actually deal enough damage to knock out the Miltank, especially with physical attackers. If you're using physical attacks, you need to be able to two-shot it, because if you don't two-shot it, it will be able to use Milk Drink. it has access to milk drink and can heal itself during a fight, which I feel like most people don't actually realize. So you have issues with the fact that it's very bulky, it's fast, it's probably got higher base attack than any Pokemon on your team. And then to top it all off is the fact that you can't even play around its weakness really, because as a normal type Pokemon, the only weakness that Miltank has is fighting type. There is only one fighting type Pokemon that you can actually obtain at this stage in the game. Actually, there's two, but one of them is Heracross. And Heracross does not learn any fighting type moves by level up, and Heracross's only fighting type move it can even learn in these generations is actually Rock Smash. Which is bad, because you can't get Rock Smash until after you beat this gym. So you've got one fighting type Pokemon who doesn't even resist the rollout, by the way, because of its part bug typing, that cannot learn a fighting type move. And the other fighting type Pokemon is a Machop you could trade for. I actually went past that trade earlier. On the 5th floor of the Pokemart in Goldenrod City, there is a trade. They will give you, depending on which game, they'll ask for either Abra or Drowsy and give you Machop in return, which sounds like a good trade, except Generation 2 is sexist. Female Pokemon have lower attack stats than males of the same species, and it depends on the gender ratio. So in a species of Pokemon, such as Machop, where the odds are greater of them being male, it means that, for anyone that doesn't understand what DVs are, the attack DVs of Machop when it's female can only be, I think, 0, 1, or 2 out of 15. So really low attack. And as it turns out, that traded Machop is female. So the best way, or really the only way of dealing super effective damage against that Miltank is a traded Pokemon that has a gender that in this game basically makes it just straight up deal less damage than it should. And so now you're in this position where you have to fight a Miltank that is stronger than any Pokemon you have, most likely. You need to fight it without being able to deal super effective damage, or if you do, you have to get a really crappy traded Pokemon. And it's bulky and has the ability to heal itself if it wants to. And it's just like a perfect storm. Yeah, it's coming. So that's the patented Whitney rant on why she actually is a difficult fight. It's not just a meme. It's not just people saying it for the sake of saying it. Like, it's genuine. The Whitney fight is actually more difficult than most other Pokemon fights. The tools available to you are just not good enough. No, but see, the difference between Whitney and Cynthia is that with Cynthia, you can have the tools to counteract her. It's just that there's a huge level spike going from the 8th